and uh, it's such a crucial matter, as all of us who practice Buddhism know only too well. But you may wonder why I chose to take first two sessions, politics and then education, and then suddenly go back deep down into our own lives. But there was a purpose behind that. The first sections of the dialogue between Dr. Toynbee and President Ikeda actually deal with this matter of the inner self, and also next, what you could call the outer self, which is our environment. So this is the way they begin. And one must remember that really, if you study the shape of that dialogue, the way in which it's set out, the way in which Sensei approached this whole matter with this great old scholar, you'll see in the end, you'll really understand that it was shakabuku from beginning to end. So Sensei begins with the inner self and then the environment to establish clearly the two fundamental Buddhist principles, most fundamental, or three really. One was the dignity of life and our connection within ourselves, the indivisible connection between our spirit and our physical self. And then from there, the absolute inseparability between our inner self and everything that's around us, our environment, or, as I said, you could call it the outer self. The connection is so complete, though it takes us time and practice to understand that. So really, by taking those two great principles, plus the dignity of life first, Sensei is setting the seed for Dr. Toynbee. And then the last sections of the book itself are the most incredible explanation of the whole of Nichiren Daishonin's teachings. So he took Dr. Toynbee from the inner self through the outer self and all aspects of society, and then finally brought it all together in terms of Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism. The last sections of this book, I believe, I'm speaking personally, I think they're the greatest statement of the teachings of Nichiren Daishonin that exist anywhere in modern terms outside of the Dosha. So this is why this book's so exciting. It is shakabuku. He was really doing shakabuku to Dr. Toynbee from beginning to end. And Dr. Toynbee was agreeing. Step by step, he agreed with everything. The one thing they couldn't agree on, I think I mentioned it, the first session we had, was euthanasia, the right to do away with yourself if your life becomes too unpleasant and tortured, and you're being tortured by your servants. Dr. Toynbee believed in Sensei did not, of course, as a Buddhist. The extraordinary thing was that in the end, I can't remember whether I told you this or not, but in the end, Dr. Toynbee had a stroke and he was totally paralyzed for a year. An extraordinary thing. This was the very matter, one point, which Sensei and Dr. Toynbee couldn't agree about. But when I rang his secretary, the moment I heard about his death, his secretary was an elderly lady who'd been with him many, many, many years. And she said, you know, the wonderful thing, Mr. Corson, was that although he was paralyzed, his eyes were always incredible, so bright, so alert. And we really felt he was, even though he couldn't write anymore, he was still working. So one wonders, of course, whether in that last year of being paralyzed, his spirit obviously is still bright. His mind is still working. And maybe, for all we know, he also resolved the matter of euthanasia. He certainly never asked anyone or indicated to anyone that he wanted to be put out of his life into death. So it's interesting, isn't it? Anyway, that maybe gives you an idea why I feel this book is so great. So I chose take the two subjects, politics and education, first, in a way because I wanted to drop you all in the deep end. I wanted you to begin to see right at the beginning, through studying those two sections, what the concept of Kosen Rufu really is. We tend to think of Kosen Rufu as some enormous, huge ideal, which is in a way beyond us. We know Kosen Rufu means a peaceful world, a prosperous world, a world in which every human being has the opportunity to use their full potential. That's a very big ideal and not terribly down to the situation that you are concerning the situation we're in now. The concept of Kosen Rufu, of course, that is the broad view of it. But the view of it in a down-to-earth form is that each single person who chants Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is creating change in their own particular, personal, individual environment. And through the wisdom of the Gohonzon working in, through the compassion of the Gohonzon working in, through the courage of the Buddha state working in, just through the influence of what they say and what they do, they bring about change in their or our particular sphere of life. Could be as a doctor, could be as a nurse, it could be as a mother, it could be as anything you like to think of in terms of society. But each one of you have a different path that you're following. Not one of you is following exactly the same path as someone else. There may be two of you who are nurses, but even so, your path is different, isn't it? That path of life that you're going down. So it's on that path, in those circumstances, without almost realizing, because the Gohonzon and the wisdom of your Buddha state is at work, that you bring about change. You influence people. What you say has a different slant to it. You don't think about this, but it has, because you're practicing this Buddhism. So you can bring about change gradually, each of you, in your own sphere of action. This is Kosen Rufu, the way, the concept of Kosen Rufu, or the way we achieve that ultimate ideal in the end of changing society, not just in this country, but throughout the world, isn't it? But this is an incredibly exciting thing. So we talked about politics, how the influence of individuals who are practicing to the Gohonzon can bring about change in the way the people use the democratic system of this country, didn't we? Just the very fact that even as a housewife or as a mother, let alone someone in teaching, or doctor, or whatever, even in that role, politics are of concern. We have to use, the human beings of this country have to use this democratic system and improve it and reform it so that it really does express the views, the many and varied views of all the human beings of this land. So even in a small way, in a simple way, just by talking to other women in your where you work, you're going to have a baby in the clinic, you can bring people to think about this in a new way. Politics are all of our concern. We're not politicians, but they're the concern, aren't they, of every human being in this country. We have the good fortune to have a democratic system. We're not a dictatorship, living in a dictatorship. We're not living in a fascist country. We're not living in a country where freedom is stifled. Therefore, all of us, all of you, can bring about this change gradually, just through your attitude, just through your way of looking at things. So it's no good sitting and saying politics is not my business, or I don't understand it. Politics is our business, every single one of them. Not in a professional way, as a professional politician, but because politics affect our lives and the happiness of the people of this country. It affects your children in the future and so on. And then we took education. Similarly, education affects everybody. We may not be educators, we may not be teachers, but education affects us. We can look back on our education and see all sorts of flaws in it. Or maybe we think it was a wonderful education, and it probably was. But that's not the end of it. The country is full of young people. Babies are being born every day. I don't know how many there are. I forget the statistics, but an awful lot. They're all got to be educated. We want a great future. Who creates the future? It isn't just politicians. Not at all. It has to be the ordinary human being. If it's left to an exclusive group, then it'll be a failure. Education has to be what the ordinary human beings really see as their need and the needs of their children and their grandchildren. So we can't say education has nothing to do with it, or we don't understand it. In a sense, of course, too, every mother and every father is an educator. It begins there at home. So in that respect, too, education is crucially important. So this is why I took those two subjects, in order to give you an understanding clearly of the concept of Kosen Rufu, or the way we can change society, each in our own individual field, through the power of the Gohonzon working in us. Now we can start to the inner self, where everything begins, okay? That's the reason why I do it that way. I hope it's understandable to you. So it's interesting that Sensei said when he was in France, just when he came this year, he wanted everyone to be like lighthouses. That was the expression he used. And really that's what I've been talking about, isn't it? On one's own chosen path in life, you stand like a lighthouse, lit up by the Gohonzon that shines in your life, though you may not realize it, through your practice. And people are attracted to it. You can help overcome, with encouragement, their negativity. You are a light to them. They see it. So it's important that we realize this and respond, isn't it? People will seek you out more and more in the future because they feel something about your life, something that's quite intangible, but nevertheless they do, because the Gohonzon is shining, even without one realizing. So as a lighthouse, we attract people, attract their attention, and also, just like a lighthouse, we can encourage them and give them hope for the future. Make them understand they're not just a cog in a wheel. Not just a cog in a wheel, because you are not a cog in a wheel. You're doing something to bring about change for the better in the future. This is our role. This is Kosen Rufu in action. You will follow. It's an incredible concept. And as I said several times, I know it's happening all over the world. Everywhere in the world, this amazing movement is taking place. It's absolutely unprecedented. It's enormous. And yet it's very down to earth, isn't it? So behind it all is the power of Daimoku. We can't appreciate the power of Daimoku. It's very difficult for us to believe that if we're chanting for peace in Am, say, that it's going to have any effect. It's not easy, is it, to believe? But the fact is, if our ichinen is towards peace in Am, if we send daimoku, even only a few daimoku every day to them, it is having an effect. You maybe can't see it on the surface of life yet, but it is. It wasn't long ago, maybe a couple of years ago, Sensei said, he actually said, when there are at least 10,000 members in every single country of the world, we will have achieved Kosen Rufu. So, of course, if there are 10,000 members in every single country of the world, there are many more than that, of course, in those countries that are the most advanced in terms of Kosen Rufu. When there are at least 10,000 members. Some countries by then may have millions. Others may have hundreds of thousands. But in his wisdom, that was what he said. Even he said, when there are 1,000 members in a country, the process of stabilization of that country begins to take place. But when you hear that, one realizes, why it was such a struggle for us to get to 1,000 members. Those last few hundred were really difficult. It was really a struggle. And there was a lot of Sanshashima around. So you can visualize also that when we get near to 10,000 members, we're going to have a great struggle again to break through that barrier. And of course, to go beyond. In many countries in the world where there may be only 1 or 2 members, maybe they're even practicing secretly for some reason, politics or whatever. There's a long way to go yet. By that time, we've got to have many, many, many more than 10,000 members. In general terms, what Sensei is actually talking about is the power of Daimoku. The united power of Daimoku of 10,000 members is colossal. After all, when you think about it, you as an individual are certainly by now getting experiences that you can change your whole life and circumstances through chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. As an individual. Put 1,000, 10,000 individuals together. The power of that Daimoku is colossal. Huge. But sadly, we tend to restrict it, don't we, with our imaginations. We can't take it in. We're sort of timid about chanting for what is best because we feel it's impossible. That's why one of the great cries in NSUK, and I hope it always will be, is no second best. No second best. You've got the most powerful weapon in the world to use to gain the best. It's true. Okay, so let's go on with the actual, to talk about this particular section. The first part really concerns human dignity. Human dignity, if you like, as against the animal instincts and actions that also exist in every human being. Because as Dr. Toynbee rightly points out, we are in fact physically animals. There's no difference in our functions to those of animals. The difference is, of course, that we have minds and the ability to think and make judgment, which other animals do not have. So that puts us in a different position. And I might say a much more complex position too. I'm not so sure life isn't a good deal easier when you're an animal and you don't have to think. And everything is from instinct. But nevertheless, if what Buddhism is teaching us is if we use our thinking minds as an instrument of the Buddha state, which exists deep in our lives, then we can be something very, very different indeed to animals. Toynbee points out that this causes innately a conflict in our lives. We have this thinking mind. We have deep in our lives the Buddhist state. Toynbee doesn't say that. So spiritually, we can feel what is good and great and valuable and what isn't. But at the same time, we have to cope with a physical body which is animal. And this brings about conflict within us. The sensei quite quickly moves on to explain those two principles I mentioned earlier. The inseparability or indivisibility of body and mind, or spirit, and the inseparability of ourselves and our environment. The first principle in Japanese is called Shiki Shin Funi. Shiki Shin Funi. Shiki is body or physical aspect of life. Shin is the spiritual aspect of life. And Funi means indivisibility, or literally two yet not two. Two yet not two. Esho Funi, you all know, I'm sure, only too well. Again, the word Funi, which is indivisibility, of Esho. Esho, meaning yourself or ourselves and our environment, body and shadow. The Buddhism teaches that when we move in some way, spiritually and or physically, the environment is like a shadow to ourselves. When we move, think something, create something, determine something, it affects exactly our environment. So, of course, what we're aiming for is, isn't it, to achieve the highest life state, the Buddha state, so that our environment, too, reflects that Buddha state, a shadow of ourselves. So by and large, I think to sum up what they both discuss and say, as human beings, we have a few alternatives as to the way we choose to live. In respect of this problem of our animal selves and our spiritual selves, we can, as the first alternative, allow our inner self to become like an animal too. That's one alternative, isn't it? And I dare say we run across a few human beings in our time who seem to be following that path. And very tragic sight it is. Such degradation. Or another alternative is to struggle to try to completely deny our animal selves and separate completely that physical animal self in terms of our inner life with our spiritual self. This is the teaching of many religions, including Christianity, that we have to separate the spirit from the flesh. It's put. Buddhism says it's impossible because of that principle of Shikishin Funi, because of the constant interaction between our spirits and our bodies, what our inner life is doing and saying or making us say, and what our physical influences, desires, pressures, and so on is doing. So it's a conflict. You can't separate them. If you're unhappy over a long, long period, you will make yourself unhealthy. If you're angry incessantly, that too will have its effect on your health. This is what Buddhism said. So many different ways, all aspects of our lives are interwoven with our physical self. One reacts upon the other. So that's the second alternative, isn't it? Third alternative, of course, is to recognize completely that we have these two aspects of our lives, spiritual and physical. So this is taught in Buddhism through the theory of Ku, Ke, Chu. I can't go into it in detail today. That's a study note. But probably you know that Ke is that physical aspect of your life. And the Ku is the spiritual or unseen aspect of your life. And the most important thing is the understanding of Chu or Chudo. Chudo, which is the middle way. In other words, there is at the heart of your life the power to bring together your physical, spiritual self, Ku and Ke, so that they work in perfect harmony. Neither one nor the other in conflict with the other. So Chu or Chudo is that binding force at the heart of one's life, which brings the two to work in perfect rhythm or harmony. So, of course, Chudo is part of your life, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. The power of the Buddha state. So, in a sense, one of the tragedies of human life up to now is that they have been ignorant of the existence of that power. Chudo, the middle way. This is why, because of that ignorance, Christianity couldn't think of any other way of teaching except to say you've just got to struggle and try to separate your spirit from the desires of the flesh. But that's impossible because both are an integral part of one's life. The Buddhism shines the light to such depth, doesn't it? And points out that there at the heart of your life is the Buddha state, the entity of your life, the entity of your life and everyone else's life, which is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, the life force or power to integrate the two aspects of spirituality and the physical self. So, of course, our great experience that we have once we start to practice is due to that integration, isn't it? To that harmonizing between those two the inner aspect of your life and the physical self. In a sense, the body or physical self is part of one's environment when you view it from the inner self's point of view, isn't it? But just the same as through the power of that state, our environment around us, we learn, is like our shadow. It reacts exactly to the state within us. Of course, the body, too, is part of that environment in a sense. So this is the greatness of Buddhism. It teaches that at the heart of us all is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, that ability to harmonize. So the authors, interestingly, but I'm sure wisely, challenge the most difficult aspect of the inner life first, the inner life and the outer life, which is sex. So they dive into the deep end themselves in that respect. I'm sure they chose sex because all the instincts of animality, the world of animality, can most easily come to the surface in a human being due to sexual desire. The most powerful desire or impulse, probably, that exists in us Therefore, sex is a problem to human beings. I'm sure every one of you would agree with that. It's a real problem. The problem between our animal instincts and our human selves. And of course, to make it even more of a problem, it is the creative power of life in terms of procreation. The human race continues to exist, or the human species continues to exist because of the sexual urge. So one can't say that you can get rid of it or chuck it away, throw it out of the door, because it's crucial to life itself, isn't it? But there are no built-in checks, no built-in defenses, if you like, against the sexual impulse. Animals have it built in. They have periods when they're on heat and when they're not on heat. It's all done for them, isn't it? They can't think. They follow a rhythm of life which is natural, built into them. But the human being doesn't have the good fortune to have periods when they're on heat and not. If we eat too much, there is a built-in defense. We get sick. Sorry to use the term, but we throw it all up. If we sleep too much, which is another animal instinct, we find we're out of work, not making any money, not getting anywhere. And in the end, that's a built-in defense against sleeping too much. If we use violence in any way, this would particularly apply to young men, that's more than young women, that if we use violence, then there's always the possibility of us getting hurt or killed. There's a tendency for a person to say, well, I got away with it this time in his heart, but maybe next time I'm not going to. So there's a deterrent there. But unfortunately, with sex, there's no deterrent. I suppose, though it's a personal thought, this one, but it's interesting thought. Please don't quote me. But Buddhism teaches that we create our own deterrents. Everyone has goodness in them. No one really wants to live like an animal. So we can create our own deterrents. If we find sex is a terrific problem, then somehow in our minds we'll create some sort of a deterrent. I mean, I even wondered when I was last night just thinking about this, is it we? What is the cause of AIDS? Why has AIDS appeared? Is it us creating our own deterrent? Because there's no doubt that the unbridled sexual influence, if it really takes hold of a person, is a tremendous problem. If they really give in to that animal instinct, and it takes complete control of their life, they suffer so desperately because of the conflict going on with the goodness in their spirit. They don't want to go on hurting and harming people, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, that's just the thought. But I do believe we create our own deterrents. And sometimes those deterrents can be physical. So even these days, you see, the deterrent of having babies is gone. 50, 60, 100 years ago, starting probably with the Victorian era, for a man or a woman to have an illegitimate baby, was a socially disgraceful thing. This led to all sorts of problems. I'm not saying that was good, but it was a deterrent. Abortion became illegal. And even the thought of having to go to some sort of witch doctor, some ghastly old woman, who tells all things to you, is a deterrent in itself. That's gone, too. The scientists invented the pill. All the deterrents disappear. So in some people, the animal instinct has run wild, out of control. In other ways, too, you can find everyone worrying about overpopulation of the world. Yet probably the same person who is concerned about that may produce a baby which is unwanted. Through, in a way, thoughtlessness and the power of the animal instinct. And we see everywhere, the media, pornography, all encouraging sex for self-satisfaction, usually at the expense of another, case of pornography. In a strange situation. Even in my lifetime, things have changed so incredibly. We've gone from one extreme to another, from intense, hypocritical Puritanism of the Victorian age, which my parents lived in, to completely the opposite direction, where everything runs wild. And there is no rock or basis on which people can base their lives, nothing that they can get a grip on to help them to keep steady and challenge what they know is running away. But really, you see amazing things. You can walk through a park and see a couple at it under the bushes. But what else is that but total animality, isn't it? Unbelievable animality. But you'll see it in any park. If you go through, if you walk through at the right time. So Sensei and Toynbee discussed this, and Toynbee says that the important thing is love. Naturally, he would say that the animal instinct, which is there, whether we like it or not, is totally transformed if it's combined with love. In other words, with absolute concern for the other person involved. And of course, Sensei agrees with that. We can't repress the sexual instinct. That's what Christianity had a go at doing, and probably other religions as well. Doesn't work. If the sexual instinct is repressed like a spring being pushed down, in the end, it's going to explode. So Buddhism rather says we can transform it. It is there, whether we like it or not, the sexual impulse exists in us, so we should use it for good and value and beauty. So we use sex, in terms of Nichiren Buddhism, for that. I suppose you could say it's using sex with wisdom and compassion. If we two people can gain happiness, value out of the sexual act, then it is good. And both will feel great if that concern for the other has taken place first. Am I wise to have sex with this person? Is it going to cause them hurt? Is there a danger of us regretting it deeply in the future? It is having sex with wisdom, isn't it? Pausing for a moment before committing oneself. So I really feel, Buddhism is incredible because it gives one the ability to do that. Nichiren Buddhism said in the Gosha, didn't it? Even in the act of love, chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. He didn't mean in the middle of the act of love physically. Of course not. But what he meant was that the act of love should be founded on Daimokkha. In other words, before committing oneself in a relationship, you really chant Daimokkha and ensure that it is wise and that it's valuable and that you can gain great happiness and value from it. That is what Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism is teaching. In that way, you can transform. You are transforming, aren't you? The sexual impulse, which can be so destructive, that you're transforming it into a force for good, force for happiness. So this may seem difficult, but it isn't difficult, I believe. It seems strange to begin with when we first start to practice to base all our decisions on chanting. So then what is being said here by Nichiren Daishonin? Don't leave sex out of it. Include that as well in one's chanting to make sure that we live a life based, of course, times on sex, but sex with wisdom. Toynbee goes on to say that he believes this extreme state which society has got into and it's affecting the whole world really arose, or the original cause of it was war, the 2 world wars. If men or women are being told that it's right to kill for a cause or whatever, that is such a fundamental ethical matter that it destroys ethics in all senses, not just killing, but in every sense. He points out the degradation of war, which came to a head in terms of the Vietnam War. Never has there been a war up to that time which showed such incredible human degradation. And many of you have seen films about it. Maybe the films are exaggerated, but nevertheless, it was a degrading experience in every respect for everyone involved in it. And this had its effect in everything. In problems over alcohol, drug taking, rape, relationships, even every aspect of ethics was destroyed by that one command, if you like. Even the church would say it was right to kill. It's incredible, but nevertheless it's true. So I can relate to that